What I want you to get a hold of as you see this, guys, is that God works in very unconventional ways in our life, but he also works in very strategic ways. Now remember, he was looking at this, he thought it was a vision, he thought it was a dream, he didn't think it was real. I've kind of felt that way at times in my life. When God worked out problems, I had no idea how I was going to resolve. But here's the key. God is not only unconventional in how he approaches it, but he's also extremely strategic. Let's talk a little bit about strategy. You know, it's kind of interesting. I think all of us probably at some point have tried to play chess. Chess is a very strategic game where you're plotting 2, 3, 4 moves in advance to be able to figure out exactly how you're going to make this work. You have to realize that God works in a very strategic way as well. Guys, in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, it says that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers and powers and world forces of darkness and spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. The question is, if that's true, how on earth are we supposed to fight that? Well, the reality is that God's the one fighting on our behalf all the time behind the scenes. And so you have to understand that God often, in a very broken world, is fighting in a very covert way, not overt. So he's working behind the scenes. Now, I want you to think a little bit about the significance of that in our story. You know, you've got Peter, and he's sound asleep. Now, could we all just agree that if we were right here, we can sleep and sleep well? I mean, think about it. There's the hammock, there's the sand, tropical location. I mean, this is awesome. Get, you know, really cop some Z's on this one. But you know, interestingly enough, if you add a bear, it changes everything, doesn't it? It really does. Well, you have to realize with Peter, the bear was already there. He was going to die the next day. They'd already told him that. So how on earth was this guy sleeping soundly? Well, you have to realize he'd been exposed extensively to Jesus. Jesus made a statement, actually a couple of them, but back in the book of John. John chapter 14, verse 27. Jesus said there, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid." Later on, 2 chapters later, in John chapter 16, verse 33, he said, "These things I have spoken to you, that in me you might have peace. In the world, you have tribulation, but take courage. I have overcome the world." You see, what happens is God looks at us and says, you know what, I've got this. He says, you do everything you need to do, put things in place, but I can handle the particulars. You continue to follow me. Guys, there's a lot of peace in being able to do just that. But I want to make sure you understand the full story we're looking at in Acts chapter 12. Because there were a couple guys we were looking at. See, that other guy, his name was James. And it says there that James, as an apostle of Jesus Christ, was killed by a sword. What it's a reminder of, and we got to get a hold of this to have true peace, guys, is that you and I live in a very broken world, extremely broken world. Do you know that the Bible says in 1 John 5:19 that the whole world lies in the power of the evil one? It says that you and I are actually fighting on enemy territory. And so because of that, when we rejected God and chose sin and Satan to rule this world, we've got a mess. We've got stuff that we have to deal with. And the reason that Peter can have confidence in this is because he knew ultimately the real question was where he ended up for eternity, and where he was in his relationship with God. We all know that death is a part of life. He was ready to be able to meet that, and because of that, he was able to have peace. You know, this is Easter weekend, and through that process, guys, it's a time we think a little bit about the death, burial, and specifically the resurrection of Christ. You have to realize in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul talks extensively about the resurrection. He pointed to all these people. Go ask them that they saw Jesus after the resurrection, even over 500 people at the same time who saw that, because he wanted to show them that they could have confidence in that truth. Bottom line is this: God dealt with an impossible situation of sin through the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. It was an unconventional and very strategic way to be able to handle it. And through that process, he reminds us that when we have problems and struggles, impossible situations, he's got a way to walk us through it too, which